Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of our Space at the Table podcast. My name is Pat Fonkushida, and I am president and CEO of the California Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce. The Cal Asian Chamber is the second largest chamber and the largest ethnic chamber in California today, representing the interests of over 754,000 of California's Asian and Asian Pacific Islander-owned businesses. We are excited to have as our second guest of our Space at the Table podcast series, Secretary Amy Tong, who leads the California's Government Operations Agency, or CalGovOps. Welcome, Amy, and thank you for joining us.
Hello, Pat. Thank you for having me. So thrilled to be here.
So can you tell us a little bit about your role as the Secretary of GovOps?
Yes. I actually get this question a lot. What does government operation, what do we do, right? So we call ourselves GovOp, just to be short. And basically, if you think about an organization, in this case, the state of California, if we think of us as a big, giant employer with 250,000 employees, anything to keep this organization going. Things like supporting our employee, the human resources side, the tech and innovation side, the procurement that the state needs to do. That's all in our portfolio. We also deal with all the revenues that comes to the state of California, such as franchise tax board and the California tax and fee for those people paying sales tax. So we make sure that we have a steady revenue stream. And then we have the two largest pension system. The public employee retirement system, like CalPERS, as well as the teachers' retirement system, to really the pension for all of the public servants. And then we also have miscellaneous departments that are just as important, such as the largest budget system, as well as a brand new system that is in development called Cradle to Career.
Oh,
yeah, that's in our portfolio.
That's very interesting.
And then we have a very unique department, such as Victims Compensation Board. That's in ours, which, last year when there was a Monterey Park shooting, unfortunately, the Victims Compensation Board was part of the service provider to those victims. So it's just a whole diverse group of entities that really helped government operation going.
You have a big job, Secretary Tong.
I have a fun job.
You have a fun job,
and I'm very,
and
very fortunate to have a very good team.
And your background's in technology. So
yes.
Which leads us to our discussion today. The Cal Asian Chamber has really leaned in to California's innovation economy. We've really leaned into what new technologies are emerging for California today, particularly as it relates to small business. And so for today's discussion, we're going to talk about the rise of artificial intelligence and its impact on just about every corner of our lives. So leading AI companies support the need to regulate this incredible technology while maintaining flexibility. And the European Union just voted overwhelmingly this week to approve an AI regulatory framework 5 years in the making. Closer to home, Governor Newsom signed an executive order last September that helps frame the approach the state intends to take. Can you talk a little bit about that executive order and what it means in your eyes, in your mind, what it means for California and California's economy?
Yeah. I mean, dealing with the evolution of generative AI is literally a major part of what we do every day now in GovOp. Maybe I can back up and just explain a little bit about, just artificial intelligence versus generative AI, which is really the topic du jour at the moment. First of all, I know there's just lots of, definition and people use different terminology, but quite frankly, AI by itself, it's been there for a long, long time already. Like even your coffee maker at home today or your refrigerator all have a little bit of a component of AI, or, the smartphone that you use, the camera that you use on your smartphone, those already have AI embedded. But what is really, really being coming to light, and there's so much conversation around it right now, is generative AI. So, or in short, we call it Gen AI. What does that really mean? So the conventional AI is it's a way to help automate things, the way to make things analyze large data set, and that's, as I mentioned, it's already in place for a while. But generative AI, which started really picking up a lot of attention last year through the release of ChatGPT or BART, people heard about that, is actually generating new content and creating new images, creating new videos that may or may not be have to be originated from human. And that's where really picked up the conversation. So what does that mean to our workforce? What does it mean to our society? What is the impact? What do we know about it? And it's because of that focus on generative AI, as you mentioned, the governor have issued an executive order in September of last year to trying to really put the state of California in a leadership role that we need to really engage and be part of this conversation.
And so, as part of that executive order, I understand that you all are working on what I would call, let me make sure that I got this straight, pilot projects, or they sometimes call it, what are the other terms that you're calling it?
Yeah, proof of concept.
Proof of concept. Can you give us a little bit of a hint, I guess, if you will, of what those projects are and what you hope to accomplish through those trial projects?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, the executive order that was laid out, issued by Governor Newsom, is really focusing the state taking a very measured approach. Because I don't know if you know this, 35 out of 50 AI companies are headquartered in California. So we definitely wanted to make sure that the California spirit, when it comes to entrepreneurship, when it comes to creativity, innovation, we want to foster that. We kind of want to continue to encourage that. But at the same time, because generative AI is such a fast-paced, evolving technology, we also want to be going in with our eyes wide open. What are the risks that comes along with it? What are the benefits? And the best way for learning these risks and benefit is just rolling out our sleeves and being part of, doing this and learn from it. So in addition to the 5 proof of concept that we're going to do, which I'll go into a little bit details, we also have issued a risk benefits analysis report in November. So that is available to the public to take a look. And in the meantime, we're working on additional guidelines for the state entity to how do you procure, how do you use, but most importantly, what type of training and job development that we need to take into consideration.
I see.
And then the reason I mentioned this is even though the state of California is doing this in the boundary, if you would, of the state government, but many of these analysis and understanding and learning really applies to the society and the industry as a whole. And the crux of all of this is that we, the state of California, are exploring through these 5 proof of concept, how do we improve in our service delivery to our customers. And our customers is really the residents of state of California. And the residents, we have to pay especially attention on the vulnerable community in so many ways, because usually those are the ones that are left behind. And so in this entire execution of the executive order, we will very also intentionally including our academia partners, community-based organizations and industry as part of this holistic team.
So the state is really saying, by doing these proof of concept projects, before we really roll out AI, right, and generative AI throughout California and give industry the license to proceed, let's try it out here.
Yes.
Let's see how we do.
Yes.
And how it helps or may hurt, right? California residents. So talk about the 5 proof of concepts.
Yeah. So the first 2 of the 5 are actually transportation related. Because we know, every day people spend so much time on the road, right? And the traffic in California is not the best thing. And especially in big cities or places that just, you always hear, traffic jam and this and that. So the very first proof of concept that we're doing is looking at whether generative AI can take a look at the current traffic pattern, especially where there's a traffic jam pattern, and then suggest some alternative route that could help better route these traffic to disperse them. Now, somebody say, well, that's no different than using Google Map today or Waze to just direct. Well, the key here is if we can figure out when the traffic jam can begin, and these are not the predicted one, like not doing traffic hour, but when there's an accident happen, it creates a backlog.
In real time.
In real time.
Yeah.
Then you got to quickly react, right? That is not something that, I mean, there's still room for improvement on that.
Sure.
But if you do divert traffic to local street, for example, what happened to those local street signals, right? If they stayed the same, then you're literally transferring the traffic lock from one place to another. So that kind of a holistic traffic management is something that we're looking at, see if generative AI can help to provide options.
I love that idea because I've always wondered as I'm driving down the highway and I see the other side of the highway backed up, I always think to myself, if I only had a sign that I could show to these folks that there's an accident down the street, right?
Direct now, take a detour
and be
now.
able to do a detour. But what you're saying is that you'll be able to then control traffic residentially as well, because when they start to diverge off of that traffic, you'll be able to then time things a lot better so that people can get to their destination quicker. So that's really interesting.
That's our hope. That's what we're going to test out, see if that would work, right?
Yeah.
Second one related to that, speaking of traffic, is that we, unfortunately, in California, has a number that's trending up, not in a good way. It's the fatality on the road. And these are what we call the vulnerable road users. These are the pedestrians. These are the people on bicycles or motorcycles. And that have the fatality rate on the roadway is on the rise. And what happened was, I've heard my colleague talking about it, is that during the past few years of pandemic, when there's less car on the road, people started driving faster on the road. But then that behavior did not change when now there's more car on the road. And then also, we have this extreme weather that also is not helpful. And when all these combination, unfortunately, created more fatality for these folks that are not in the vehicle. So we're trying to take a look, all these accidents happening on the local street or even on the highway, whether there are other prevention options that can be done through, generative AI recommendation. Is it better lighting? Is it better sign? Is it better different route? Those are the things that we're also trying to use AI to see what can be recommended on.
Wow. And that requires obviously a tremendous amount of investment. And so talk a little bit about the California and the administration's commitment to that investment.
Right. And that's a very good question because we all know, I'm sure everybody heard that we're dealing with a budget deficit at the moment. And the question is like, what do you do with this on, right? And as I move to third and fourth proof of concept, further speaks to the investment sometimes is really not a monetary, to do that. It's really about cultivating partnership with our industry.
Yes.
And the state is investing our own resources and the large data set that we have. Although these data sets are already publicly available, there's no sensitive data in it. There's no, health data in it. The two example I'm talking about is language access. In helping people to get access to all the public service, how do you use perhaps generative AI coupled with all of the knowledge base that does more than a translation for our residents, but how do you, provide these services in multifaceted way through language access, as well as the fourth example I cited earlier for the proof of concept is how do we improve the efficiency of inspecting the health facilities, not sending a robot to do inspection, not like that, not that kind of a sci-fi kind of a movies thing, but as the inspector going to inspect a facility to keep them operational. Typically right now they have to go back in their car in their office to look up all of the laws and regulation that they have to be complying with. But if we apply generative AIs to it, would that speed up that type of compliance check? And those are the investment we're looking at. How do we use things that we already do today, but leveraging the technology such as a generative AI to improve the efficiency of the state operation?
And I think that you're leaning into industries that could really use that transformation. We're talking about transportation. we're talking about healthcare. These are the things that really do impact California residents. What are the other types of proof of concept pilots that you're working on?
Yeah, I'll
The
just
last
wrap it
one?
up.
Yeah.
Last one, wrap it
Yeah.
up on the fifth one. And actually, this is run by Department of Tax and Fee, and it's in the GovOp portfolio, and it's helping the taxpayer that have questions about the sales tax. And it's how to improve the call center that currently helping with these taxpayers to see if we can improve our ability to answer their question in a faster manner to reduce the hold time on the call center and just to be more efficient in what we do. And that is something is improving customer service. So if you look at the five, right?
Yeah.
Traffic management, reduce the fatality on the road, really a public safety, health and human services, how to use language access to reach out to the diverse community that we have in California. How do you improve efficiency of state operation by inspecting the facilities, keep them operational faster, as well as improve customer service to our residents.
And are you rolling all these out simultaneously?
Call me crazy, but yes,
Oh my gosh.
we're actually rolling all of these out simultaneously, and I'm very happy to say that in each of these cases we have received hundreds of interested parties from the industry, combined with just that's all sizes, including small business.
Yes.
Partnering with a large business and academia to just give us ideas on how they can utilize Gen AI.
That's wonderful. I'm going to be really excited to hear the outcomes of these major proof of concept projects. So what happens next with the executive order? The governor firmly believes that this technology is going to transform our economy. Is there any next steps that the executive order calls out for?
Right. So while we are quite excited about doing these proof of concept, as I come back, that we're also very mindful that we're still in the learning stage. And that's just not just us, just the entire industry are still trying to figure out what are the risks that we need to be, really, really careful with. Many times we hear about privacy, we hear about security. We want to make sure that the data that we use to tune these generative AI models doesn't impede people's sensitive data. And being the state, we are the custodian of public data, and we don't want to lose that trust by not doing this carefully. So as part of the executive order, every step that we take, we're going to be very transparent about it. We're going to share our learning. We're going to share every step that we go through so we can bring the public along. We can bring our legislative member along. We can bring the stakeholder along. And we feel like that is a very, very important way for us to be just, again, be transparent about what we do.
I think that transparency is so important. And policymakers, the innovation needs to occur. And so from an industry perspective and a small business perspective, our position is that, yes, we want to protect privacy. Yes, we want to protect the data. But we also don't want to stifle innovation. And so, part of, I think, of the conversations we're having around AI today is really how do we continue to allow for that innovation while making sure that we're protecting the rights of individuals, privacy, and all the things that, that the policymakers are worried about, as they should be.
They should be. And I would even add a step further to that is also the affordability of this particular technology, right? I mean, the privacy side, the security side, it goes without saying that we need to keep that at the forefront of what we do. What is the service? Does it have a positive impact to our vulnerable community, negative impact to our vulnerable community? Example of that, for example, my dad is, 87 years old. And he's not very technology savvy, but just enough to be dangerous. Like he has an iPhone, he plays with it. But he constantly get these videos or these messages that sent to him. And for someone that's 87 years old, and it's a second language, English is his second language as well, it's very hard for him to distinguish what's real and what's not real. Mm-hmm. Now, this, somebody say, oh, that's just the same thing as, elderly falling into scam. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? The scam now are very real. And the bad part of it, sometimes those are generated by generative AI. So how do you making sure that as this technology rolls out, how do we continue to provide enough education, to these vulnerable communities to make sure that they don't, fall into something that they shouldn't be doing? We need to keep that in mind.
And I think that that's so important. And I think what I'm hearing is if California can get it right, California is first in a lot of things. But if we can create that regulatory framework and get it right, because I think, honestly, where goes California goes the rest of the country. And that regulatory framework is going to be so important and so crucial to how we actually adopt and how we are caretakers of this new technology. It's really interesting from a small business perspective, and I wanted to just touch on this a little bit with you, Secretary Tong. From our perspective, we think innovation is going to be key for our small businesses. We think it's going to be key because we are our own legal department. We are our own marketing and customer service department. We don't have the luxury of having an army of workers to help us grow, right? And so we look to generative AI. We look to that as part of a solution. And so our hope is that when the policymakers start to take a look at this, they look at it within the eyes of how it affects small business, not only small business, but to your point, minority small business, right? To your point, the affordability is going to be crucial, is going to be key. And so I would hope that as you're starting to take a look at this and you're starting to do these proof of concepts, that you do keep in mind the impact to small business and how we can help and what the opportunities are.
That's an excellent point, Pat. I'm so glad you bring it up because at the end of the day, what it's good for a technology if there's not, able to afford it or adapt it or use it, correctly, right? And that is part of the assessment that we're also going to do when we talk about vulnerable communities. One, small business is at the forefront because, small business, especially in California, is really drive the economy. We heard a lot right now that, these big, large language model out there that really is the few large business that can afford them and they can train them. But in the end of the day, who's going to use them? Small business, to your example that you provide, to help with their legal service, to help with their accounting service. That's where they can see efficiency. But how would they use it, right? And that's where a lot of the translation from these large language model to become an application that for specific use. And that application is also affordable by small business, as you mentioned, that could utilize them. And that is something we're also keeping that, while it's exciting on the development of generative AI, how do you actually make it so that everybody have an access to it? It's one of our focus when we are studying this as well.
Well, thank you, Secretary Tong. It's been a pleasure. You're our second guest at the Space to the welcome to our Space at the Table. And what's our call to action? We're not going to leave here without a call to action. This is going to be broadcast to a lot of our members, to a lot of our minority communities. What's our call to action in your mind? What would you say?
What would I say? Well, before I go to the close of action, I just once again thank you for having me on this. It's just my pleasure to be here, and podcast is such a good way to reach out to everybody that interested in the topic. And in that, reaching out is one thing. The call of action, I would really say, we'd love to hear from all of our community. We'd love to hear, the small business owner, the people that are running the community-based organization, because in what we do, we don't want to be in an environment that we're creating administrative policy or regulatory framework without the voice of our community. So if this is a way of reach out, but then on the flip side, it's a way to create a feedback loop, have information coming back to us, we would love to work with you, Pat, or any other entities you like to create that level of a feedback loop so it can really, really represent what is important to our community.
Well, thank you, Secretary Tong, for your time today.
Thank you for having me.